Y'all know we love keto, but the reality is that even a squeaky clean keto diet can be a stressor on the body at times.
Yeah, in fact, some of the benefits of nutritional ketosis are due to the fact that it is a hormetic stressor. So when we take into account the influence that ketosis has on hormone benefits, for instance, we know that ketones actually cross the blood-brain barrier and can engage with the HPA axis. So this is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal feedback, or basically the fight or flight response in the body. This is why nutritional ketosis can be such a benefit for neurological conditions, as well as epilepsy and seizure activity, and even aid in, when docking with that hypothalamus area, supporting the pituitary and regulating your follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. That plays a big role with fertility, and this is where we see all those keto miracle babies. We also know through the state of nutritional ketosis, you tend to see lower insulin levels, which supports balance with our sexual hormone binding globulin. And then furthermore, we know that ketones can actually aid in GABAergogenic expression, or aiding in GABA, that neuroinhibitory mellower out signal in the brain. So ketosis can be a great tool to offset anxiety and aid in optimal mood stability. So the myriad of benefits is wide. We see metabolic health, of course, diabetic prevention, you name it. But as a stressor, just like anything, if we put in too many stressors in the body, let's say that you're also intermittent fasting or doing extended time restricted eating, you also are under high emotional stress, maybe you have a lower percent body fat, well, long-term nutritional ketosis can actually flip the scales unfavorably, setting up that stress to drive imbalance instead of support for whole body health.
Sure, and add to that other preventative measures like exercise or sauna use and things like that. That can add to that stress bucket, right?
Most definitely.
So let's talk about why we might want to carb cycle in a keto diet. What are some of the benefits?
So when we think of nutritional ketosis, the benefit is, of course, to get into ketosis of carb restriction. But again, too deep of nutritional ketosis, we may see the benefit of carbing up or doing a carb cycle, which is going to support leptin expression. So maybe first we should unpack who would be a candidate for carb cycling, or who should consider carb cycling. And I think that'll help to weave together the story.
Yeah. So individuals who are at a low percent body fat, especially women, women who are seeing a change in their menstrual cycle, those who are experiencing unfavorable symptoms all of a sudden. Maybe they've been keto for a year pretty tight, and all of a sudden they've got insomnia, or they're no longer feeling satisfied, and they've really seen the benefit of the weight loss. They've gotten close to an optimal body percent.
Yes, I think that's a huge indication, Becki. When you kind of forget about food early onset with the keto diet, that's because of leptin, which is a satiety-based hormone. So the word leptos in the Greek language actually translates to the word thin. And leptin is a hormone that is often supported with nutritional ketosis. In fact, leptin is produced in the small intestine based on fat consumption. So when we eat a higher fat diet through nutritional ketosis, we often see increased leptin production. We also know that leptin can be manufactured or seen in the bloodstream, broken down from our body fat as we metabolize fat as fuel in the production of ketosis. So from your body fat reserves, that body fat loss tends to drive leptin expression. And this is where people get that keto high. That's also a lot of the mechanism of the benefits of feeling more mellow and calm. We've even seen in research that leptin hormone may be an indicating factor of what aids in reducing the seizure activity as well. So leptin is really key in all of the keto high or benefits. And for individuals that run low body fat, they don't have that deep freezer reserve to drive leptin liberation from body fat loss. So low percent body fat is a huge at-risk area. And then in those areas of people that are type A, over-exercisers, over-caffeinators, and maybe not getting quality sleep, they're under a higher fight or flight stress response. So they're burning through leptin to be that safety signal. So people under high stress are at risk for sure. And then those people, because of maybe the satiety or the lower appetite, may not be consuming high enough fat, so they may not be getting that leptin production.
Totally. And individuals with thyroid dysfunction or adrenal dysfunction as well. Those who maybe have seen their thyroid function kind of start to tank because of that over restriction and just duration of time on keto, quite frankly.
Most definitely. And it's important to acknowledge we have leptin receptors on our thyroid. We also have leptin receptors on our ovaries. So as you mentioned earlier, if you have been doing a ketogenic diet and your cycle was every 28 days and all of a sudden it's shortening, you may be seeing a signal of anovulation or not ovulating during your menstrual cycle. So carb cycling can be a great way to kind of slingshot or rev up your leptin, which supports healthy hormone expression throughout the body.
Sure, and this can even be a great tool for the individual who has maybe 5 more pounds to go and they just can't break through that plateau, I think, too. So let's go ahead and talk about what our unique approach to carb cycling actually would look like for one of these individuals.
Yes, this is kind of an area where I think our program and the unique functional medicine approach of carb cycling really shines. And I've done so many podcast interviews as a guest speaking about this idea of carb cycling for women's hormone balance. And that's really the main priority population that we start this with. So when we are using carb cycling, we're taking your base intake of carbs, and you may have watched our video prior on metabolic flexibility. So when we're talking about metabolic flexibility, you're going to eat as many grams of carbs as aids in your body still producing ketones in your bloodstream. So this may be 30 grams of carbs, upwards of 60 grams of carbs, depending on your muscle mass, your activity factor, whether or not you're breastfeeding, and so many other lifestyle elements. In a carb cycle, you're going to add 30 to 45 grams of carbs on top of that base intake. So for me, generally speaking, a typical day for me is about 45 grams of total carbs per day. And when I carb cycle, I'm going to add 2 carb choices or 30 additional grams of carbs onto my day. And that will look like 75 grams of carbs, maybe upwards of 90 on a carb cycle day.
Okay, in those carb cycle days, what we tend to do is to bring carb cycling in on days 19 and 20 and day 1 and 2 of your menstrual cycle. So let's talk about kind of some of the mechanisms of why we do it at that time.
Yes, so I mentioned before that nutritional ketosis can have a role on your follicular stimulating hormone and your luteal hormone. And these are kind of the ebbs and flows through your menstrual cycle that play a key role in ovulation and fertility. So when we're looking at leptin levels, they actually cascade in the women's body during their menstrual cycle. And we see that leptin levels are lowest in that progesterone peak kind of post-ovulation, about 5 days post-ovulation. Generally speaking, for most women, that's going to be about days 19 and 20 or thereabouts. So 5 days post-ovulation is the key time to carb cycle, and we recommend doing that for about 2 days. The reason, again, is to support those low leptin levels through that cycle. And then if you notice benefit, you may also play with days 1 and 2 of your menstrual cycle. For some women, their follicular stimulating hormone time, or that beginning set, their follicular time of their cycle, is the time when they have lowest appetite, and that's not necessary. But for other women on days 1 and 2 of their cycle, they really like that food freedom to plan for avocado chocolate mousse, or maybe engaging in some sauteed peaches and coconut oil and some heavy whipping cream as a mindful indulgence that also may support that leptin resurge.
So on those particular days, we're consuming the carbs to really refill that leptin tank, if you will.
Yes. So when you're doing prolonged nutritional ketosis, you're metabolizing out your glycogen stores, or your body's storage of glucose, right? Because you're using ketones as an alternative fuel source. Your body makes moderate amounts of glucose, but it should be very sustained, not having those peaks and valleys like someone who would not be in nutritional ketosis. So when you have sustained glucose levels in the body, you also have sustained insulin levels. In fact, many people that are doing a prolonged or long-term ketogenic diet, their fasting insulin levels will be significantly less than 8, even in the levels of like 1 through 3. I've even seen clients that have non-detectable fasting insulin levels. And so there's a connection between this leptin hormone and insulin. Leptin is actually insulinogenic. And so when you're doing your carb cycling, you're actually strategically kind of stimulating a glucose spike to get an insulin surge to tell the body, oh yeah, Allie's fed. She's not in this suppressed state of false hunger. She's fed fed, she's safe, so you get that safety valve of that leptin fill, which generally supports then prolonging the menstrual cycle. And we know the menstrual cycle is like a fifth cardinal sign of health. And so getting that regulated and having ovulation really shows that that parasympathetic regulatory function of the body is optimized.
So how about women who either don't have a menstrual cycle due to amenorrhea or loss of period, older women who are in menopause, or men? Do these individuals need to carb cycle, and would there be benefits?
I think that's a great point. So again, leptin has a function on many organs in the body. Like I said, it also, like ketones, crosses the blood-brain barrier. It has an impact on our thyroid. It has an impact beyond the menstrual cycle. So if you're dealing with anxiety or insomnia, or all of a sudden hunger is starting to come back up and you're white knuckling your keto diet and dealing with cravings, doing a carb cycle approach might for you also rev up that leptin and aid in resetting and getting that keto high once again. So I think it'd be fine for anyone to play with carb cycling. I generally recommend staying within 2 to 4 times within a month. If you are a woman that is of cyclical age, but you have lost your menstrual cycle through chronic stress or over-exercising or other hormonal impacts, you might consider following the moon. So we think of the new moon as representing really like those days 1 and 2, or the active period. And we think of the full moon being the ovulation window. So you could also carb cycle on the full moon every night, and then consider carb cycling on the new moon. And then the other consideration would be for men or women that are athletes using carb cycling to enhance performance. So they could do carb cycling following a lot of glycolytic activity or really heavy lifting and muscle work. And we can also finally use carb cycling just for food freedom. Like if you have a wedding or a big event or travel, it's okay to be kind of on a continuum with your diet using food as medicine. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And carb cycling can allow that permission, which kind of takes the power of carbs off the pedestal and neutralizes everything.
Sure. I'll often have clients who don't have a cycle plan their carb cycles, though, just so it doesn't become a wash across the board. So they're literally plugging into their calendar what days of the month they're going to be doing those carb ups.
Yeah, and I think as long as you're checking in with yourself and it feels sustainable and doesn't feel like a binge guilt shift, I think that's one of the most beautiful things about carb cycling is, again, it allows permissive for eating seasonally, local flavors, and having these mindful indulgences while still harnessing and supporting your body's health and metabolic function.
So let's go through and just talk about what a typical day on carb cycling might look like, including the timing, or what time of day is best to do a carb cycle.
Yes, when you want to get the best bang for your buck for that leptin surge of safety and parasympathetic, that's that rest, digest, regulate, metabolize world, you want to focus on carb cycling in the evening. That's going to be best for neurotransmitter function with serotonin support as well as melatonin, getting through deep, restful sleep. So that 30 to 45 grams of carbs would be situated in part with your dinner and maybe even an after dinner dessert. So for a typical day, I always like starting off with a good glass of filtered water and take my morning supplements. So 16 to 32 ounces of water, always to kind of rev and support your liver. And then I would go on to breaking my fast with 2 eggs and bacon, some sprouts, and half of an avocado. And with that, maybe having a glass of green tea. That would be around 11 a.m. Following that, maybe doing like a half a cup of berries with a tablespoon of chia seeds and maybe 3 ounces of coconut yogurt, like a full-fat coconut yogurt, and some cinnamon in there. And then in the evening meal, I would do a maybe ribeye, so like a 6 to 7 ounce ribeye steak or part of a ribeye with roasted Brussels sprouts. And then I would do maybe 2/3 cup of roasted sweet potato in coconut oil. So if I was just on metabolic flexibility, pretty much up until the sweet potato would all work, but I would generally do only like a 1/3 cup of sweet potato. So a double serving of sweet potato, and then also maybe doing 2 bacon wrapped dates as a part of the dinner, delicious, to get more carb support. And even would have allotment if I wanted to do like a half cup of peaches cooked in coconut oil with some cinnamon on top. for dessert, and fresh herbs or something.
Amazing. And let's just cover when we're carb cycling, do we need to then turn down that fat a little bit because the carbs are coming up, or should we?
I think it depends on the individual. So if you're someone at a low percent body fat and you're looking to carb cycle to get that leptin surge of safety, you may keep your calories consistent. But if you're someone who still has some body composition goals or some weight loss goals and you're using carb cycling to keep your cycle intact and to support your metabolism goals, then I would say you definitely want to lever down your fat intake. Probably a solid 20 to 30 grams of fat reduction on the days of your standard macros when you're carb cycling.
That sounds like a really delicious approach to a carb cycle. Drop a comment below and let us know, have you tried carb cycling? What's your favorite thing to carb cycle with? And make sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date with all of our Food is Medicine content. What about people who don't have a period?
Yeah, great question. Can you say women?
Women.
Or no, just say people, it's fine. I don't care.
I was going
Right.
to include men with
Yeah.
Oh, that was so woke of you.
Yeah, I know.